Okay, maybe these aren't exactly secrets, but ZBrush does have a way of making some of its functions hard to find or hard to understand what they're doing. So let's look at an obscure menu that's hard to find and see what we can do with it.
Okay, this one you might find by accident if you're just kind of stumbling around on the keyboard, trying to hit Control and Alt at the same time or something like that. If you hit Control Spacebar at the same time, what you'll get is a little pop-up menu with 3 settings in it: B radius, polygroup, and unclip. Now these are all options that are meant to be used with the clipping brushes. So let's go ahead and switch to one of those. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and we'll get the different brushes that work with this. And we'll go ahead and pick Clip Rectangle. Okay, now let's see what the Clip Rectangle is going to do by default. So let's look at this from a front view. Let's drag up from this direction. Okay, so what it does is it doesn't necessarily cut off pieces, but it takes everything outside of that box and it forces it down to the edge of where the box was drawn out at. So if we hit Shift F to look at wireframe, you can see it's the same topology that was there. It's just all pushed down to a single flat level. So let's hit Control Z to undo this, and let's see what some of these settings do. So I'm going to hold down Control and Spacebar. Let's try Polygroup first. So now let's try this again. Actually, I'm going to use a different brush for this. Let's hold down Control, Shift, click on this brush, and let's get Clip Curve. Okay, now with this, I'm going to hold down Control and Shift. We'll just draw out a curve, and you might even want to hit Alt to get some curve points in here. Okay, and let's see what happened now that we have the polygroup setting. Now, actually, just by coincidence, it assigned a new polygroup color that was pretty much exactly the same as the color that was there by default. So let me try this one more time, and hopefully, just by sheer luck, we'll get a different color just to make it more obvious to see. So same thing as before. Actually, let's do it without hitting Alt, so we get just a straight line. Okay, now we can see it made it a separate color, so we get a separate polygroup here. And this can be very convenient because if you're using this brush to flatten out an area, it's very possible you might want to have a polygroup just for that section. So that makes it very easy to create a new polygroup whenever you use a clipped brush. Okay, let's hit Control Z to undo this. And let's look at one of the other settings. So let's hold down Control, Spacebar, and turn on B radius. Let's just draw out a straight line across here. And what you can see that it does is it kind of flattens out a certain section of it, but then it leaves the rest of it rounded out the way it was before, but it's kind of pushed down. So if I hit Control Z to undo that, you can kind of see back and forth, Control Shift Z to redo that. There's something kind of interesting about that. And what it's doing is it's using your draw size of your brush to determine how much gets flattened before it goes back to being the original shape. So if we hit Control Z to undo that, we get a larger draw size here. Let's just try this one more time. Now you can see, if I turn off wireframe, that because we have a larger draw size here, it's flattening out much more before it goes back to round again. And with wireframe, you can see, of course, we still got a new polygroup on there. Now there's one more setting here in this menu. If I hold down Control and Spacebar, there's Unclip. And you can kind of read this description of what it does, but let me just show you. So the way this works is you go ahead and do a clipping. You can do it with or without polygroups. You can do it with or without the B radius. But once you've made it, you can go ahead and do any sculpting on this. I'm just going to do something random. I don't know, maybe it looks like his brains or something. So let's try to do something that looks like a brain pattern here, just to be funny. All right, now once you've sculpted something, you can hold down Control and Spacebar and click Unclip. So what this does is it takes any sculpting that you did to that clip section and restores the model back to where it was before, but leaves any of that sculpting on it. Now, to be completely honest, most of these settings, particularly the B radius and the unclip, are a little bit obscure. I'm not exactly sure when I would actually use them. Polygroup, that makes sense. I can see why I would want to use that a lot. The other two, you might find some really strange situation where this is just right for what you're trying to do, but for the most part, I really don't find a need for these two. But maybe that's why they're in such a difficult to find menu.